Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure tonight to invite someone I respect so much. I've watched from afar, and it is such an awesome privilege that he would create the time out of his busy schedule to honor this invitation. Sir Edbert Abebe is a lawyer. He's an adaptive leadership coach, speaker, trainer, and author. He's the current team lead of Abuja Civic Leadership Center, ACLC, a nonprofit with a mission to build the capacities of individuals to practice leadership anytime, anywhere. He's also the CEO of ACLC Consulting, a leadership consulting firm with extensive capabilities and experience in the design and delivery of innovative, high impact leadership development programs for individuals and organizations. He's an alumnus of the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government, Boston, Massachusetts, where he honed his skills on the art and practice of leadership development. He is also a certified trainer, speaker, and coach of the John Maxwell Leadership Team, which is the largest leadership organization in the world. He has spent the last 15 years examining and instructing on the subject of leadership and authority and how individuals and organizations can sharpen their leadership edge for maximum productivity. He was involved in the global gathering of 62 other leadership practitioners from 18 countries in Wichita, Kansas in 2012 to engage in large-scale leadership development for the common good of society. He sees the urgent need to make a radical shift in how we think about leadership and in the skills that should be encouraged in individuals who take on the task of leading. He holds a postgraduate diploma and an MSc in Peace, Conflict, and Strategy Studies from the Nile University of Nigeria, and currently is a doctorate student in the same field. He is actively involved in peace and conflict issues and how adaptive leadership can be employed to manage conflicts. As an accomplished adaptive leadership and learning professional, he recognizes that most challenges faced by individuals and organizations are principally adaptive in nature, so will require an adaptive approach to make progress regarding them. He is therefore a super advocate of the practice of adaptive leadership as a critical tool for making progress by individuals, organizations, and nations. He oversees the Center for Adaptive Leadership in Nigeria, the local chapter of the international body Adaptive Leadership Network based in the US. He's a member of the Adaptive Leadership Network International, an associate of the Institute of Strategic Management in Nigeria, Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and Conciliators of Nigeria, and the Institute of National Transformation. He is married to his highly estimable wife, Opeyemi, and they both have 3 children. Wow. Sir Ed, for real. Sir Ed, for real. Before I go over to you, I'm just probably going to take my stab on what I think in adaptive leadership is practical leadership, in my opinion, in my understanding, a framework that helps individuals and organizations to adapt to changing environments and effectively respond to recurring problems and things like that. And so I think in my thinking, so tonight is going to be a time of learning for me. Also, my thinking, it's always typically about first the change itself needs to be considered. Consequently, to subsequently take on challenges and respond to change. So wow, I am looking forward to learning something new on leadership. And tonight we have with us, I can see your gratitude, grateful for finding purpose. Someone says grateful for living, for life and strength. Someone says good evening, everyone. I'm grateful for my tribe. Tonight, good evening, everybody. Once again, please welcome as he teaches us for the next 20 to 30 minutes on adaptive leadership, and we're back with Q&As. Please go tell everybody to hop in. Sir Ed, thank you so much. Thank you for honoring us, and we're looking forward to learning from you this evening.
Thank you so much, ATA, Aaron T. Aaron. Really appreciate having me, and great to be on this platform. Thank you so much, and also for everyone who has logged in. Good to have you all. And we're going to have a wonderful time as we talk about adaptive leadership. So we talk about leadership. Leadership is a passion for me. I love to talk about it, and I believe that it's something that we can teach, we can learn, we can grow in it. So I have a few slides. All right, it's I want to be mindful so that I'm within the time boundary. So I would just flow with the slides. Okay. Oh, that's good. That's good. I can see that. So how do I get to indicate so that we go on to the next slide, or do I just do it the way I'm meant to do it? Okay. Let's see. All right. So like Aaron mentioned, as in Abuja Civic Leadership Center. And then before I begin to talk about leadership, I want to say a few things. Okay, that's right. Before I begin to talk about leadership, adaptive leadership, I want to lay the foundation so that we can understand and then see the flow. And let's look at the concept of leadership. All right, leadership is such a common word. It's such a common word in our lexicon, but interestingly, it's pretty scarce in our experience. And some individuals might wonder why that is the case. And oftentimes also it's important to ask, what is leadership, right? If you type the word, you Google the word leadership, as in it's so common. There'll be several meanings and definitions of what leadership is, but we're going to interrogate that word and look at what really is leadership. There's several leadership books, leadership authors, leadership practitioners, but I've been making some suggestions here. And part of what we do at the Abuja Civic Leadership Center and the various centers that we operate, it's an attempt to redefine leadership, the concept of leadership, and to suggest to you that oftentimes what we think leadership is, it's not exactly, all right. But this is an adult learning forum, so we can disagree to agree. And I would just ask you that be open. All right, some ground rules from my end, just to say also be open to receive thoughts. All right, I might throw some thoughts out there. I would like you to not necessarily, you can rent them. All right, rent the thoughts for a while, and then you can later, if you do not agree, then you can evict the thoughts from within your space. But just be willing to rent the thoughts. All right, just rent it, consider it, accommodate it for a while, and then get to think about it. So we want to look at really, as in what is leadership. Okay. Oftentimes people get to, when I'm talking about adaptive leadership, and then people say, "Oh, what's adaptive leadership?" I say, first and foremost, let's look at what is leadership. What do you consider the word leadership to mean? All right. And I've come to see that for most individuals, once the word leadership is mentioned, what comes to their mind is the guy who is sitting behind the big chair, the CEO, the big authority figure, the Prime Minister, Mr. President, the guy who's got the authority, all right? And there's a whole huge confusion and controversy about authority and leadership, okay? So when we talk about leadership, the short answer is leadership is an activity. Now, what does that mean? Leadership is the activity of mobilizing individuals or others to tackle pressing and daunting challenges. Like I said, just rent the thought and hold it. We will come to look at a few things. But very quickly, some thoughts about leadership. I mean, I have some assumptions about leadership that I'd like to suggest to us. All right, we will consider some of them. But first and foremost, the first is leadership is an activity, not a position. Leadership is not a position. Leadership is what you do. Authority is a position. People hold it. Leadership is an activity, people do it. So leadership is always about what you do. Authority is a position, people hold it. Leadership is what I'm suggesting to you, that leadership does not refer to the individual. Leadership refers to the activity that the individual carries out. Leadership is not a noun, it's a verb. Leadership is not a noun, it's a verb. It's what you do, it's not who you are. Authority is a position, people hold it. So you can have authority and practice and exercise leadership. You can also have authority and be very far from the practice of leadership. Number two, anyone can lead anytime. Leadership is not reserved for a few persons, all right? And also, if you notice, I am pretty intentional in the choice of my words, and I'm talking about leadership, all right? I seldom use the word leader, and we will get to know as we move along. Anyone can lead anytime, all right? A husband can lead, a wife can lead, the security man can lead, the janitor can lead. They can exercise leadership. Leadership is not restricted to a few persons, and I think that's part of the drawback and the challenge that we've had, particularly in our communities, in our societies, where leadership is arrogated and ascribed to a few individuals. All right, and I think we have too many challenges and problems in our society and in our world to leave, leadership to just a few persons. Everybody can exercise leadership. Let me pick up the pace since I have just a limited time. Leadership starts with you and also must involve others. It begins with you. Leadership begins with you, but also must involve others. All the practice of leadership begins with you first and foremost, exercising leadership over yourself, all right, taking responsibility. All right, but ultimately has to involve others. All right, the purpose must be clear, and then also leadership can be risky. All right, we would understand much more about that as we go along. Leadership, the practice, and one of the reasons why we don't see much more of leadership is because it can be hard, it can be challenging, and also it can be risky. All right, let's move ahead. All right. If I may, okay. All right. Okay. So I have a toolkit here where you have power, authority, charisma, talent, wealth, influence, intelligence, okay. Let's see this. Power, authority, charisma, talent, wealth, influence, intelligence. These are all tools which can either promote or hinder the practice of leadership. Okay, but they don't define leadership. They are tools that can be used, all right, to aid, to enhance leadership. Back in the days, some persons, oh, we want a charismatic leader. Okay, a leader that is extremely, charisma does not define leadership. Charisma is a tool that can be used, all right, to enhance your practice of leadership. And you can have charisma and lead extremely poorly. Okay, Hitler was a very, very charismatic individual, and we can debate a whole lot of things, regarding that. Okay, quick one: difference between authority and leadership. Okay, authority is A, authorizing B with power in exchange for service. Authority is A, authorizing B with power in exchange for service. And this definition holds true whether it is formal authority, as we can see, whether with the prime minister or the president of the country or the CEO of a bank or anyone who's been authorized formally. And also this definition also holds true with informal authorities, with a father, a priest, or you talk about your hairdresser or even the barber. Okay, I'm hoping to go get a haircut soon, and then when I come into the barber's shop and then I sit down, I have informally authorized the barber by sitting down to fix my hair. And the reason for that is in exchange for service. Just the way authority is formally handed over to an individual, whether in the highest seat of government, and the essence of it is certain individuals authorized him by going to the polls. And the reason why that was done is that it is meant to be in exchange for service. But authority is different from leadership. You can have authority and not lead. You can have authority and not practice leadership. In fact, the reason why we complain a whole lot, why there's so much murmuring and complaining, is because we have people who have been authorized. Individuals have authorized, but they are not leading. They are not practicing leadership. They have no idea about adaptive leadership. Okay? And also we see that authority typically provides protection, direction, and also order. All right. Okay. Let me flip. We've seen how leadership differs from authority. We also see that management training also differs from leadership. Okay, difference between authority and leadership. Authority and leadership are two different things that I've mentioned. That authority is a position people hold it, and leadership is an activity people do it. I've got a very wonderful picture here. One of Africa's finest, heroes, even in death, the great Nelson Mandela. The great Nelson, Mandela, who's one president of and father of South Africa and the Rainbow Nation. The reason why we celebrate him. Why do we celebrate him? The reason why we celebrate him is not because he had an authority position as the president and commander-in-chief of the Republic of South Africa. No, that's not the reason why we celebrate him. The reason why we celebrate him is because of what he did with the authority that he was authorized, that he was given. Because there have been other individuals who held similar positions after him. Why are we not celebrating Jacob Zuma the way we are celebrating Nelson Mandela? It has to do with actions that were taken. It has to do with how he inspired a collective purpose. All right? In my typical, if I was, I could share a video, but typically there's a video that I share, a very interesting video from the wonderful movie, The Invictus, where Morgan Freeman depicted the Nelson Mandela and showed, some excerpts of, you can see someone who's got authority, but you can see the practice of leadership. And we begin to differentiate between authority and leadership. All right. Now let's make some progress. Leadership exists. Let's look at life in the gap. Leadership exists in the gap. Leadership exists in the gap, and everything rises and falls on leadership. And it's important to recognize that this statement is not referring to a few individuals. This statement is not referring to a few persons who've got authority. No, it's a wrong thought. That thought needs to be, we need to interrogate it. Everything rises and falls on the practice of leadership, which is available to any individual who will take it. And so we see leadership exists in the home, in marriages, in our offices, in our communities, in our societies, in our companies, private and public sector, in our nations, in the word. We need to have much more of the practice of leadership. So what do we mean when we say life in the gap? Leadership exists within that gap. There's always a gap. So talking about mind the gap, you have to pay attention to the gap. Let's look at it. I put up a question here. Question 1. When you think about the future of your business, your family, your organization, your community, what concerns you the most? What are your biggest concerns? When you think about what's going on, the organization, what concerns you the most? Question number 2. When you think about the future of your business, organization, community, what are your aspirations? So we're talking about concerns, aspirations. Concerns and aspirations. Concerns. There's a gap, and then you have the aspirations. Concerns, gap, aspirations. Question 3. Why is it so hard to make progress from concerns to aspirations? What makes leadership? We've said that leadership is the activity of mobilizing people to solve difficult problems, and that everyone can exercise and practice leadership. But what makes leadership difficult? Why is it so hard to make progress from concerns to your aspiration? What makes leadership difficult in the gap? What makes leadership so difficult in the gap? The reason for that, and I want to suggest to you this evening, the reason for that is that it involves adaptive work. Adaptive work. So we have the concerns, the aspirations, there is a gap. And the reason why leadership is so difficult is because it will take adaptive leadership, adaptive work to move from your concerns to your aspirations, to move from where you are right now to the dream, to the ideal. You want a greater community, you want a greater business, you want to see a greater nation. If you're on this platform, you are a Nigerian, you want to see a great Nigeria, you want to see a greater Nigeria. You have concerns, all right? A question that I tend to ask all the time, it's when I meet a number of elders and people, and I say to them, I say, when you look at the nation, what are your biggest concerns? When you look at the youths of this nation, what are your biggest concerns? When you look at the issues we have with insurgency, insecurity, and all that, what are your biggest concerns? Then also, where do we want to get to? What are aspirations? What ideas do we have? The gap, the process of getting from the concerns to your ideal and your aspiration will require leadership. And why that leadership is extremely difficult, and oftentimes we don't see the results that we should get, that we should have, is because it involves adaptive work. It's adaptive leadership. So let's look at what is adaptive leadership. What is adaptive leadership? Adaptive leadership is the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and to thrive. It's the practice of mobilizing people to tackle tough challenges and to thrive. And the concept of thriving when it comes to leadership relates to an organism that, for it to thrive successfully, for there to be successful adaptation of an organism that in an environment that it finds itself, first and foremost, you have to be able to look at, we need to preserve, there are certain things that are essential that must be preserved, all right, for that organism to survive. And there are certain things that are no longer useful that needs to be discarded. And then there are new capacities that the organism does not possess that needs to be developed in order for that organism to thrive in the environment? Very quickly, there are certain things that you have. You can look at it in a community, all right? We look at, for a community to move forward, you want to look, okay, what are the values? What are some of the norms and the values that we must preserve? They're essential. What are those values that we need to change? Okay, that we need to discard, those things that we've imbibed that we need to. And then what are those values and skills that we must cultivate to be able to move from where we are to where we need to be? And even if I want to use COVID as an example, all right, where a number of individuals and companies needed to pivot, okay, there was a whole lot of adaptation that took place for companies, for individuals, for nations, and all that. And they had to quickly consider, all right, what is important, what is essential right now to preserve, what is essential to discard, and what are capacities that we don't have that we need to build, because as a company, we need to survive. As an organization, we need to survive. As a nation, we need to move forward. Okay, how we've always done things, we can't continue in that way. So setting norms, certain ways of doing things, we need to change it. There are some we need to preserve, some we need to discard, some we've not done before. So we need to build the capacities to do it. Still talking about adaptive challenges, and let me quickly throw this in. When we talk about adaptive challenges in leadership, we view challenges and problems in two dimensions. Okay, there is a technical and the adaptive. Technical approach and the adaptive approach. Technical challenges are addressed when you have changes in people's priorities, beliefs, habits, values, and loyalties. I repeat that. Adaptive challenges are addressed. You make progress on adaptive problems and adaptive challenges when you make changes in the people's priorities, their beliefs, habits, values, and loyalties. So quick difference between a technical challenge and an adaptive challenge. A technical challenge, as the name goes, you need to change and fix a fuse, or is a technical issue. You just get a new one, you fix it. A technical challenge is easily solved by an expert, an authority figure. It's something that you don't need any adaptation. It's somebody in authority can come in and fix it. A quick example I'll give you, it's a child requires a doctor's attention. There's a broken arm. Doctor comes in, the expert gets to fix it, and then it's okay. Or a child needs an antibiotic. There's an infection, and so the doctor prescribes, and then deals with it. A few days later, that child is okay. But it's a different matter if somebody goes into the hospital and then has to do a heart surgery. Now, the challenge has both the adaptive and the technical component. Now, what is the technical component? The doctor, who is the expert, comes in and then performs that surgery, fixes the heart, makes the amendments and all that, opens some of the arteries, and that's good. But you all will agree with me that before the individual leaves the hospital, the doctor will come and have a good talk with him to say, gentlemen, for you to be alive in another 2 years, you need to make some lifestyle changes. If you're smoking, you need to stop smoking. If you're drinking hard, you need to get some exercise in. You need to change your eating habits. Now, for that individual to make progress, for the doctor to make progress with him to ensure that he's alive in a couple of months or in a couple of years, the individual with the challenge has to be willing to make adjustments in order to make progress. So when we talk about adaptive challenges, the individuals with the problems must be willing to change for the problem to be solved. That is the difficult, that becomes the difficult issue, because at that point you begin to wonder, as in, okay, now, as in, so I have to do without the salt, I have to do without this, so the man says, let me just die now, as in, I can't eat again, this is no longer food. If you know what I'm talking about. So when we begin to talk about adaptive leadership, it's mobilizing people to make adjustments in their priorities, in their beliefs, in their values, in their habits, in their preferences. And that becomes the difficult part. And unfortunately, we have a lot of individuals, as in authority figures, who do not understand that this problem is an adaptive problem. So trying to use authority to deal with the symptom will not solve it. The issue of corruption in Nigeria is not a technical problem, it's an adaptive problem. The individuals, everyone must be willing to make adjustments. EFCC cannot solve it by arrest and prosecute alone. No, that is a technical approach. It is important. But you are not going to achieve the kind of results, you are not going to make progress if you do not consider the adaptive approach to it. So you have to be able to mobilize the people to see that we have to adjust our ways and our thinking. So their loyalties, their habits, their values and all that. To get to the root of it, you have to consider it an adaptive issue. Okay. Do I still have time? I'm getting into the groove and into the meat of this. So I hope this is clear enough. So when we talk about distinguishing technical and adaptive work, for a technical problem, the challenge is clear, okay? But for an adaptive, it requires learning. For a technical work, the solution is clear, but for adaptive, it requires learning. For a technical problem, it's the work of the expert or authority figure. But for adaptive, it is for the stakeholders. Okay, for a technical work, its type of work is efficient. But for adaptive, you have to learn to be experimental. Timeline for a technical work is as soon as possible, but for adaptive, longer term. Okay, in terms of expectations for technical problem, you fix the problem. But for adaptive, you make progress. And attitude, confidence, and skill. But when it comes to adaptive, there has to be some level of curiosity, all right? Because we are willing to learn, because you don't have all the answers. You definitely don't have all the answers. Okay, question 4, and let me raise up and try and wrap this up in another 5 minutes or thereabout. Question 4, when the work is adaptive, requiring leadership, when the work that we need to do, and oftentimes we talk about the work of leadership, and it's something that I've been researching on for a while. When we look at the situation in Nigeria, for example, what is the work of leadership that is required? When you look at an organization, I consult for a number of organizations, and then you come in and then you look at what's going on. You ask yourself, what work of leadership is needed to make progress in this organization? What is the work of leadership that is needed to move from concerns, to fill the gaps that exist between the concerns and the aspiration? All right. The work of leadership. Leadership also, let me quickly say, leadership is a behavior. It's an activity, it's a behavior. It's what you do. So when we talk about the work of leadership, and I need you to consider it, even sometimes I get to ask myself, I say, okay, what is the work of leadership that is needed to make progress with the concerns that I have in my family? Because we're all growing. I've got 3 kids, all right? 17, 14, and 11. What is the work of leadership that is needed to make progress with them? They live in a different dispensation from when I was growing up. And part of that work of leadership is I need to interrogate and look at my defaults. Because often, if you're not careful, you might want to raise them the way you were raised as well. I'm constantly looking at the lines of code that is running through my mind and my system as as I interact with them. Are these lines of code a function of how I should be relating with them, or these lines of code are consistent with my defaults and how I was raised? What is the work of leadership? In raising communities and building healthy communities, what is the work of leadership? And to answer that, the work of leadership are the behaviors and attitudes that we need to develop to make progress, the capacities that we need to develop to make progress are the following. They're not exhaustive, but I'll submit this to you. 1, you have to learn how to diagnose effectively, diagnose situations. 2, you have to learn how to manage self. 3, you have to learn how to energize others. And 4, you have to learn how to intervene skillfully. Diagnose situation, manage self, energize others, and intervene skillfully. The first one, these are broad subheads, as in we can actually spend a week talking about diagnosis situation. Now, why is the first? What we commonly say is that for anyone who will lead effectively, for anyone who will lead, who in your practice of leadership, you will make effective progress, you will lead effectively, all right? The number one recourse and first thing that you need to ensure is that you are able to diagnose situations. You're able to diagnose effectively. Why is this important? Because where the diagnosis is wrong, the prescription will be wrong. So oftentimes what we say or people or individuals say is the problem is really not the problem, possibly a symptom of the problem. So you need to ask, what really is the problem? All right? ATA, please guide me in terms of time. I tend to just, all right, do I still have, I think I'm almost at my time boundary.
I'll allow you begin to round up.
Okay.
I'm also aware that you're a preacher, so.
So we say, you have to learn how to diagnose effectively. All right, because where the diagnosis is wrong, the prescription will be wrong. Is the first point of call, as in what's going on here. And that's where a lot of persons, as in, falter or they make mistakes when it comes to the practice of leadership. Because when you are not able to identify what the problems are, your interventions will be wrong. And 2, you have to be able to manage self. That's so, because oftentimes we get in the way of the practice of leadership. Your mindset, your defaults, your ego, all that gets in the way of the practice of leadership or the activities that need to be carried out. And then you have also to be able to energize others. Okay, I commonly say this, and it's no without prejudice, and no do not mean any disrespect. Immediately after the elections in I think that was in 2015, and then Mr. President a few months later was somewhere in the US, and then he was asked a question about the Niger Delta, and then he said something about the 97% and the 5%. That was a missed opportunity to energize, inspire a collective purpose. It was not an issue of 97 and 5% because you are president of the entire country. That was an opportunity to be able to say, come, we would, Niger Delta issue, I am here as president of every Nigerian. I need to inspire everybody. We need to resolve this issue. We need to talk about it. We need to work together, And then the fourth one, you have to learn to be able to intervene skillfully, all right? So where we are so far, to just wrap up, is that there is a gap between where we are and where we want to be. The gap is difficult to close because most of the issues are adaptive. They are not technical issues. And most of the issues we relate with, whether in schools and homes, they're all adaptive issues, all right? Where the people with the problem need to change. And then there has to be leadership in inspiring and mobilizing them to change. Authority alone is not sufficient to close the gap. Leadership is required to mobilize people to do difficult work. Progress will require us to do something different. And to make progress, we will need to develop capacities. And I've suggested to you that there are 4 capacities to develop: diagnose situation, manage self, mobilize others, and then intervene skillfully. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you so much. I mean, there's so many, let me show you some of the words. This is enlightening. And some things people are picking out. Charisma is a tool. Well, someone says word. While you were talking, I was just some thoughts. I was taking some notes, and the past year, pretty much the past year, almost and a half, has probably created the highest demand ever, like you were sharing, for adaptive leadership. Here in the West, across the world, the jury's out that leaderships that were led by women tended to do much, much better. In one of my coaching calls today, one of my clients who lives in one of the areas governed by a woman would say, no, she thinks that the women have acted more in fear than being adaptive. But with COVID-19, it generally presented different challenges, and that need to adapt quickly, transform quickly, and it placed a spotlight on leaders, especially, be it in political, business, health, education, even in our homes, like you were sharing. So if we look at how countries responded, Taiwan continues to post great results. Singapore had 38,965 cases, only 25 deaths. Taiwan had only 94 cases. But then you look at the USA, the so-called leader of the world, recording over 300,000 deaths. What have you got to say to that?
Yeah, it paints the picture that we're talking about, where leadership has to go beyond authority and power.
Yeah,
it has to go beyond ego. So you can be the most powerful political figure in the world and yet be failing in your practice of leadership. Because the COVID issue, it was a part that we had not been before. It required much more than sitting behind the desk and issuing instructions, or somebody coming up with some this is what everyone must do. COVID tested the leadership of a lot of presidents and prime ministers. To what degree can you inspire a collective purpose?
Yeah.
To what degree can you bring your citizens together and get them to understand that this is what we need to do? This is not talking about mixed messages now, all right? To what degree are you able to speak from the heart? Because that's part of leadership, and show empathy, all right? And meet the people where they are, that we understand what we're going through. We understand that this is going to be tough, because part of the practice of leadership is that you have to identify with the losses of the people.
Yeah.
Because actions will generate losses, but you have to be able to identify that this actions, this process, it will generate losses, but it is important for us to move from our concerns to our aspirations. For the progress that we want to make, this is important. And this is where the competencies, comes, where you have to be able to appreciate, show empathy, appreciate the losses. So in a number of authority figures, and I like to refer to, when you say leaders, I say authority figures, because they fell flat. They couldn't practice and exercise the leadership because it went beyond the stamp and the authority that you had. It needed much more. And this is why we focus and we talk about the competencies are important. How do you even manage self? Because sometimes your ego will get in, all right? And we saw a lot of that, all right? And then your ego becomes a hindrance to the practice of leadership and what needed to be done. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make perfect sense. So question then becomes, so why adaptive leadership? How does it contrast itself with other leadership frameworks that we read in books and systems? And I mean, how does that contrast?
Yeah.
And how did you get into this concept itself?
Okay. A major difference between adaptive leadership and several other frameworks and thoughts about leadership, all right, like you would see, particularly if you look at the number of literatures and books, they talk about leadership styles, different leadership traits and all that, and largely the focus is on the individual. I mean the leader. Okay, so what kind of style, what kind of traits does it bring to the table? All right. A major feature of adaptive leadership is that it promotes distributed leadership, where leadership is not centralized with just one individual or one figure who you call the leader. All right, because the personally I feel that the leader follower framework, all right, is a bankrupt idea.
Yeah.
Because leadership is supposed to leadership is supposed to build capacity, not dependency.
Build capacity, not dependency.
Yes. Leadership is meant to build capacity, not dependency. And not just have, I have 10,000 followers. I have 20,000. Jim Jones had thousands of followers.
True.
And on one day, they all gathered, and then led by the leader, they all took cyanide and they passed on. You understand? So I'm giving that example to explain that we need to begin to interrogate some of these thoughts. The whole concept of leadership should be leadership creates leadership, not followers.
Yep.
Communities, and if you look at the process of how as in social mobilization and communities and societies are built, it is an individual who is exercising leadership and then inspires people to begin to exercise leadership, and then you have distributed leadership, all right, and that brings about the building and sustenance of a society. And unfortunately, we're beginning to see less and less and less and less and less of that, because we have there are no lone stars in the practice of leadership. All right, there are no single champions. No, it has to be distributed leadership. Okay, individuals have to act and take certain actions that mobilize these people, and then they begin to do same. All right, and then also that brings about a rippling effect, and then other individuals begin to do same. I honestly believe that for the kind of change that we need to see, particularly in the Nigerian environment, is such that we need leadership from every single sector and individual. Everybody needs to act. And I usually will pose the question and say, okay, for those within the faith community, what is the work of leadership you should be engaged with?
So you went there because I was going to come there. Go on.
Yeah, for those in the faith community, what is the work of? What does leadership represent for you? For those in the media, what does leadership represent for you? For those in the economy, what does leadership represent for you? Because oftentimes we find the people in various sectors and who within their own space and environment, they are not exercising or practicing leadership. But it's easy to point fingers. And we go back, it's the same as a rigmarole and circle where we are arrogating leadership to a few persons. No, we have too much problems where we're just looking at a few. Now, the authority is important and they have their responsibilities and their roles. But when we're talking about leadership, it is a task for everyone.
Wow. Wait, don't you think does adaptive leadership then present more risk within, let's say within a corporate environment? You typically would have at least two kinds of problems, technical and adaptive. And with technical problems, you have satisfactory, like predetermined response already is already available, and an expert is already at hand to solve issues. Whilst you have with an adaptive problems, there are absolutely not necessarily any trained experts to deal with the problem at hand. Also, no set established rules or procedures that may exist to address the issue. Does this not present a challenge in itself?
I would approach it like this.
Okay.
It presents rather an opportunity. I would see it as it presents an opportunity for discovery. Because adaptive challenges presents to us opportunities for learning, for experimentation, for discovery. And now, one of the reasons why I agree with you, it's why oftentimes individuals they want to stick to the technical approach, all right? Yeah. And then, of course, because of the expectation of the leader has to provide answers. He has to get things done. Okay, he's got an appraiser in another 6 months. At the end of the year, I mean, he's people expect, oh, you are the leader, so you bring the suggestions, you produce the ideas, you suggest what needs to be done. So I agree that there is that pressure on the individual, to perform. But that said, it's important for him to be able to diagnose effectively and say, okay, what's going on here? What is going on here? Adaptive solutions might take a bit more time, but ultimately, it will be necessary, if it is an adaptive issue, to make the progress that is needed to be made. Now, we must also, in our practice of leadership, learn, because again, part of the challenge of that is why also one of the competencies that we need to build is to learn how to manage self, because as individuals, we always want to be in control, all right? But the practice of adaptive leadership sometimes would need you to lose control to gain control.
Love that.
Where you come to the place where, okay, I am really not I have no ideas, this process. And really COVID presented such a scenario for a number. There were times where and it was important for authority figures or leaders to just be able to come to the people and just say to them, I honestly don't know. I don't know. But that is difficult for some leaders, all right, because they feel leaders ought to always know. That thought, that assumption is also bankrupt. There are times when you don't know, and there are also times when the idea will come from your team. You don't know, and part of your responsibility is to inspire your team to get them to that productive zone where the idea comes from someone who might be the least in the group and in the team.
But that's already if you're an adaptive leader, right?
Yes. Yeah.
If you already are embarking and understanding these leadership principles and not the I am the only one that knows everything type leadership. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's why the individual needs to make the shift. I mean, I don't know if anybody got to follow the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, his daily briefings during the height of COVID. There was a lot to learn in terms of the four competencies of leadership. You saw empathy. You saw times where he identified with the losses of the people, where he inspired a collective purpose. There were times when he was vulnerable, and he just said to them, "So, well, I don't know, but something I can tell you is that we are doing our very best. We will walk through this together." Yeah. So that's leadership. All right. He had authority, but what was needed from him was beyond the authority he had, but people wanted to see how well he could take action and also mobilize people and get things done. Yeah.
Good. As a pastor
Yeah.
within our churches and our church establishments, where we've got faith and operate from faith, lay down principles and doctrines,
Yeah.
and sometimes can be quite rigid, right? Can adaptive leadership actually be applied to environments like that, where some of those rigid doctrines are sold as values written in stones?
It can be applied 100%. In fact, I'm yet to see a more adaptive leader than the leader that we have, or you talk about Christ Jesus.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm yet to see one who practiced leadership. And I mean, the scriptures, we have a plethora of scriptures that talks about that, where you would see, first and foremost, in his dealings with us through the Holy Spirit, you see that it is not just the application of authority, but rather it is working in us both to will and to do, and getting us to change our priorities and our mindsets and our beliefs and all that. And that is the process of adaptive leadership, where to make progress with us, he gets us to shed certain thoughts and also to embrace certain thoughts. You understand? Yeah. He gets us to shed certain things that we are loyal to, certain habits, certain preferences, certain beliefs, certain values. There's a renewal of the mind. Otherwise, the kind of progress he wants to make with us, he won't make that kind of progress. That is adaptive leadership. And within the church setting, it is so important that authority figures come to understand that leadership is about service. Leadership is not the people serving you, it is you serving the people. And that also we see examples in scriptures, right? Where as in he had authority, but he decided not to hold on to the authority. He was equal with God, but decided not to hold on to the authority with God, but decided, or shed the authority and decided to serve. All right. And then he came to that place where the reason why we are here where we are is because somebody took action, somebody served. All right. He carried out an activity, so in every sense, if I had a number of my thoughts on leadership and inspirations, I get it from the scriptures. And much more in the church setting, we need to see adaptive leadership, because we need to be part of the concept of adaptive leadership. It's that we have a concept where we talk about raising the heat. Where that means that to surface the challenges, you need to raise the heat a little bit. And for those people who cook and all that, you would a quick example I would give is, for example, a pressure cooker. All right, if the heat is too low, it won't get the job done. If it is too hot, then it blows the lid off. So you just need a required amount of heat. All right. So unfortunately, within the church circle, we seem to be averse to conflict. All right. There's sometimes when you need to raise the heat and then bring out some of these conflicts so that we can deal with them, so that we are not dealing with symptoms. We go to the root of the challenges and then we solve them.
That is so good. That is so good. So then, most times people understand, and you and I understand, that positional leadership is the least form of leadership. But a lot of people understand. Okay, I can see a question. I'll come to that. A lot of people understand leadership as I'm the boss, you're the employer dynamics, that kind of thing. But it appears, and I don't know if winning people is the right word, it appears you have to win people over to your side to apply an adaptive. You have to have people. I mean, John Maxwell says, if you're going to be a leader, people better be following you. You have to have people who are following you. So how should organizations adapt if they have leaders that are stuck in their ways of doing things by the book?
I guess they have to keep training and then keep communicating this new thoughts and about what leadership really is about. All right, that leadership is about mobilizing people to solve challenges. Leadership must be connected to problem solving. A major challenge we have is when somebody thinks he is exercising leadership because he has authority, or he thinks that he is practicing leadership because he's the CEO. So I mean, in that kind of an environment is the authority figure and the leader needs to recognize that you need, the goal of leadership is to make progress. Like I said, is to close that gap between concerns and your aspirations.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you don't see that gap is not being closed. There's no movement. And to close that gap, you need to work with people.
Yep.
And to work with people, oftentimes you have to meet them where they are.
Oh yeah.
Not trying to pull them to where you are. You have to meet them where they are. And to achieve that, you have to be ready to listen. And if you understand that leadership is about service, then you have to learn to listen.
Yeah. I mean, everything, even sales and all that, you have to listen to make sales.
You have to listen.
Yeah.
You have to listen because you don't know everything.
Yeah.
And if leadership begins with you and then it engages others, then you have to be able to, because you have blind sides.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to listen and then hear people out and then walk with it.
Let me take this question by someone here. This is, most organizational challenges are technical, though. They may start out being adaptive issues. I guess this is around the technical and adaptive we were talking about. But at some point, they would have cookie cutter solutions and as such require such authorities or technical leaders to manage. Do you agree or think that regardless, adaptive leaders are required nonetheless?
Okay. Now, my thoughts are, particularly in organizations, I mean, this is my experience, that most of the challenges that they experience, some come in, they have technical and adaptive components, all right, with respect to the challenge. But from my experience in working with a number of organizations, most of their challenges are adaptive challenges, all right, the adaptive challenges. Sometimes you find them focusing on wanting the organization to be smart, all right? The technology is okay, the strategy is okay and all that. But we've come to see that why productivity is not at the level it should be, or why they are not making progress the way they should, is not because of the smart infrastructures and strategy. And no. It's the adaptive issues. It's a lack of trust. All right, is the ego issues, is the lack of vulnerability, is the lack of ability to inspire collective purpose. You understand? These are the root issues where people are not able to work together. And if you want to look at, except you want to deal with the symptoms, and that's what happens oftentimes. And then that's why if I come into an organization and then I want to do some kind of a debrief and then do a diagnosis to say, okay, what's really going on here? I don't just talk to the top guys. No. I want to be able to get inputs from everyone, because that process is extremely important. What is going on?
Yeah. You know, in the John Maxwell team, we've got this thing called the leadership game. And every time I've gone into an organization or gone to groups and played the leadership game, you literally see tears.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden the leaders begin to see how other people perceived them or perceive the things that are happening in the organization. And
Yeah,
sometimes you actually begin to find out that the real leaders in the organization were not necessarily the people that the person or the individuals that people called leaders.
that's right.
And such people are just even finding out on the table how they've been perceived all this while as the real leaders, and they may not necessarily have the position. So
That's
does
right.
adaptive leadership mean that you have to be prepared to relinquish some of your power as a leader?
Adaptive leadership encourages the individual to practice leadership irrespective of whether you have
Position.
authority or a position.
Yeah.
In fact, the you're encouraged to, you want to see more individuals with informal authority exercise leadership. People who they don't have formal positions, but they are able to build an informal authority. This lady who's championing girls' education and started from Afghanistan, Malala Yousafzai. What position did she hold? She was not a member of parliament. She was just a schoolgirl who wanted to see changes, who wanted to move from concerns to aspiration. She wanted to fill the gap. And we have a whole lot of leaders who have exercised leadership, and they didn't have no position, no authority. Even the like of the Martin Luther King, when he started, he started with an informal authority. The only formal authority he had was in regards to a not-for-profit. Is the SCLC, as in that he had, I think that's the Southern Conference or Leadership Conference that he had authority over. That was all. So really, we need to see more individuals. A major drawback that we have in this generation is that people think that without authority, they cannot exercise leadership. So people are craving for authority. People are looking for authority. You have youths who are waiting by the stands, and they are waiting to be for authority to be given to them. I said, no, you don't need it. All right, you can practice leadership without authority. That is why I don't like the saying that our youths who are the leaders of tomorrow. I said, what's that? No, it's we need our youths to begin to learn leadership, take action today, practice leadership, build the competencies. And in fact, where they are right now, they can begin to exercise leadership such that when you now give them authority, they build competencies and they'll know exactly how to govern themselves.
Wow, just thinking through that. So four main principles I think I was reading earlier on around adaptive leadership: emotional intelligence, organizational justice, development, character. We had someone also from the John Maxwell team a few weeks ago, who was the last 2 weeks ago, who talked on emotional intelligence, and he broke down the importance of emotional intelligence. What would be your definition of emotional intelligence and the importance of emotional intelligence in adaptive leadership?
Emotional intelligence is an adaptive leader needs to understand emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a subset, as it were, of managed self within the adaptive leadership framework. Okay, so an adaptive leader needs to understand the concept of awareness. You need to be aware of what's going on. All right, that also comes under the auspices of effective diagnosis. You have to be a leader who is aware, who understands. You come into a room. All right, you come into a room, and then you are able to understand. I mean, there's the movie of Mandela's first day in the office, and then he comes in, and then one of his assistants, Mandela, looks at her and said, "Brenda, you have your hair done. I like that." That's the leader who's got emotional intelligence.
Yeah, aware.
You see things. I mean, as a husband, you need to be aware. Okay, if you know what I'm talking about. You come in, you see something is different about your wife. As a school teacher, you need to be aware. All right, it's all part of adaptive leadership, where class A, how you deal with it is different from class B, but let me, that's what I don't digress. So it's important. All right, that's also part of the difference between management and leadership. Management
Yeah.
has the SOPs, management has the rules and the regulations, and then you apply it generally to everyone. But like I often would say, there is nothing in the SOP that tells the organization how to deal with
Mm.
a female staff who got jilted on Sunday and has to appear at work on Monday.
Yeah.
SOP doesn't cover that. It will take leadership. It will take emotional intelligence. It will take adaptive leadership for a superior, for someone to be able to just look at her and say, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
All right.
Take a break.
Take a break. We need to fix this, because for me to make progress with you regarding the work that we need to do, I need to engage with you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's all self-awareness. And even in coaching, it's always a big thing. I have clients who would come in and say, I want to lose weight. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then I look at them and say, but you don't have a job. Can we can we fix the job situation first? Because the gym is expensive.
Yeah.
The eating healthy foods are not very cheap. So do you mind if we step back a bit and start from here? And sometimes that's what makes some of us different as coaches, is that, look, I mean, I have clients who I would honestly say, look, if I had a client the other day, when we went through her finance, I said, there's no way you can afford me. I don't know how you've been doing it, but you couldn't have been earning this and be able to afford me,
Yeah.
And that's just being aware and not thinking, hey, you're paying me, just keep paying me.
Yeah.
When we were talking earlier, you said leadership is an activity, it's not a position of authority. Leadership is a verb, not a noun.
Yeah.
How do you sell this idea in the hemisphere of the world where we come from? And you spoke a lot about it, where everything is seen through the eyes of authority, from the agbero, the hustler on the street, to the police officer in uniform, to the guy in the workplace, to the councillors, the governors, the chairmen, even senators and presidents. I mean, I was reading something last week, the whole Patami situation, tribalism and all that just comes into the situation. And then and who have to be, and for them it's respected. They believe they have to be respected because of their position. And then looking at your tools of leadership, power, charisma, talent, beautiful tools. You talked about wealth, influence, intelligence. It appears that many leaders try to use these as their style of leadership.
Yeah.
One alone doesn't work. Why?
We need to first and foremost, we need to redefine what leadership is, and we need many individuals to get involved. All right. And part of redefining it is to be able to say to individuals that power gives you charisma, wealth. It gives you at best, it gives you authority. That is why a wealthy, if, for example, you're in a meeting and or you're and then Dangote walks in, oh my, as in you look at him again, this is because he's a man of means, and you know him. He commands a certain level of authority. All right. Someone that is important walks in. So even charisma, some people still argue that the fact that somebody is charismatic means that he's practicing leadership or is a leader. So no, charisma gives you authority. That's all. If you actually look at the thoughts of Max Weber when he talked about the whole concept of charismatic authority and all that, it gives you authority. But so what I think we need to do is we need more individuals who would keep explaining these thoughts, That
Mm.
and one way I attempt to do it is to hit home to say leadership must be connected to problem solving.
I love that. I
Leadership,
love that.
if you are not solving problems, then you are not leading properly.
I love that.
So you can have
Leadership
all
must
the
be connected
tools
to
you can
problem
have,
solving.
as in, if you are not solving problems, right, you are not making the community better. I mean,
Mm.
sometime last year, I had a meeting with the 12, counselors in AMAC in Abuja. That was just before COVID, middle of March. And then we sat down with them, looking at the various competencies, these competencies of leadership,
Mm.
effective diagnosis, manage self, energize others, and also intervene skillfully. And then we realized that these were authority figures. These are people who make laws, but as to what really are the challenges, that became an issue. What really are the problems? Looking at the problem tree, and how do you identify? How do you diagnose? So I think it's important for us to constantly engage with these thoughts and say to them that, listen, what will stand you out? And I've given the example of a Nelson Mandela and all that. And why it's important to look at leadership in these terms is that's why we can also learn. Because if we are not able to interrogate, to assess, to examine the actions and the activities of individuals, how do we learn from them?
Mm-hmm.
All right, rather than say, oh, yes, a charismatic leader, a great
Yeah.
leader, and all, and then we focus on the individual, and then we don't even consider the actions. Winston Churchill, all right, before the Second World War, if you were going to analyze his actions and activities, a lot of it, you will see that he was, I know some Britons won't like this, that he was almost like a colossal failure. But you see, you can practice leadership in one aspect, and then also you can fail in another aspect. Okay? Yeah. So, but when it comes to the Second World War, by reason of his activities, he did a whole lot of things right. Okay?
Yeah.
And that leadership, I mean, in a sense, it's, stood him out and all that. So we can learn from it. And there's sometimes where you fall down, you fail, but you get up again. You don't get all things right. And then we keep learning. And we can learn leadership.
That in itself is the maturity of the leader, right?
Yeah.
Being able to fall and fail and stand and fail and go back again and show people that we fall sometimes and get up and try again and be adaptable and try different ways.
Yeah.
And just keep going. Yeah.
I mean, Mandela, in terms of uniting the nation, he exercised leadership and did well. But when it came to the land issue, it was a different matter. All right, which they are still trying to, recover from. So we need to be able to put things in perspective when it comes to the issue of leadership. And that's why my focus is always on the actions of the individual and not the person. Okay?
Yeah.
Actions, the activities, what he does. And I've said that there are competencies that you can learn and you can build that will aid you in more often than not carrying out the right actions.
I mean, this has been so enlightening, and I've enjoyed this conversation. And I'm looking at the time. Let me see if I can throw in one more question. Okay. So, what we find challenging, most people don't know how. Most of us don't know how to get from our concerns to our aspirations, and I'm noticing that gap is a hurdle to get over for a lot of people. As a final word, what are the skill sets anyone needs, to be able to make that jump?
Okay, I would mention again four competencies that are important to build, to learn, to be able to fill the gap, make progress, that jump from concern to aspirations. One, you have to learn how to diagnose effectively. You have to build the capacity to diagnose effectively, right? Two, you have to build the capacity to manage yourself, because oftentimes you get in the way of the progress that needs to be made. And three, you have to build the capacity to energize or mobilize others, because you need others to make progress from concerns to your aspirations, to fill that gap. And then also, 4, you need to build the capacity to learn to intervene skillfully.
Wow. Sir Ed, Pastor Edbert, thank you for a great session this evening.
My pleasure.
This has really been enlightening. I can't wait for us to get this on other channels and YouTube. Somebody just said, absolutely, we are in the way of aspirations here. For a lot more people to hear this conversation, this has really been, I was really looking forward to this. And hey, guys, we're going to keep this on so that a lot of people can get to keep watching this over and over. Sir Edbert, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you crisscross across the countries and how busy and spending time with the family. Really do appreciate this time. Everybody, we'll be here again next week, Monday, with a guest. Somebody says diagnose, manage self, mobilize, intervene skillfully. Good stuff. We'll be here next week, Monday, again for another time of learning. It's been a great evening this evening, sharing with Sir Edbert Abebe. All right, good night, everybody. Have a good evening. God bless.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah.